all you wonderful humans, and welcome to another Wicked Cool Kids podcast. We've talked about the methods and mindsets behind creating our characters and what we have found works and doesn't based on our experiences. As always, I have Jason, Kristin, and Lee with me. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hello.
So, talking of our experiences, let's delve once more into our past characters and talk about our first, worst, and favourites. Jason, why don't you kick us off and tell us a bit about your first character?
Yeah, just put me straight into the deep end. Cool. My first character was a paladin. They seemed really cool at the time. When I was first playing, it was like, oh, big armor, have a big warhammer, charge in and beat the crap out of people, which was my interpretation of D&D when I first started. So I was like, I'm going to play that class that can do that and get away with it. With the help of Seb, who guided me a little bit, said, yeah, if you want to play that class, paladin is kind of the way to go there. You can help the team out because he knows I'm more of a support role, so I can alternate into that kind of position if needed. But ultimately, get in there, have a fight, and come out victorious was my goal. The name of the character escapes me. It's been too long since I have played that character. We played him for probably Dave. Yeah. Dave or John. So something probably very basic.
It's always Dave.
It's always Dave. Everyone's Dave until you're not Dave. But yeah, I only played in 3 sessions, and then the campaign ended. So that was my first character.
And I guess you never used him again then, by the sound.
Never used him again. I struggle using the same character in different scenarios. I kind of like my stuff lore based. Now we come to this later when I talk about probably one of my lesser liked characters. But yeah, I like to keep my world separated as much as I can. I'm very much this belongs to this world, and in this new world it has to be a completely different character because it just grinds in my own brain too much. So.
Sure. That makes sense. So I mean, it sounds like you took a relatively, I guess, computer game approach to D&D initially. Does that sound right?
Yeah. That was the experience I had up to that point, was solely computer game RPGs. So I was coming from a Elder Scrolls or a Skyrim kind of background with that kind of role-playing scenario. That was the most closest experience to a tabletop role-playing I had up to that point. So very much.
I think that's so similar for so many people. Like exactly as you describe it, so many of us, our first experiences are of computer games or even, frankly, movies or novels, and we have that mindset of the story arc of the rise and the peak, and your whole purpose for being there is for a big fight.
Yeah.
I think the more we play, the more we realize.
That's how Seb described it to us. He's like, well, what Lord of the Rings character do you want to be? Or something along those lines. It probably wasn't Lord of the Rings that he used as reference. It's probably more akin to like some kind of anime, because that was kind of the background of that relationship of we're all kind of into anime. So he probably used that kind of reference, but I can't recall right now. But definitely influences from popular media or games was totally my background for the first character.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. How about you, Lee? What was your first character?
So my first character was a half elf druid, Circle of the Moon. He lived a life out in the forest, never really socialized with people. And then once he joined the party, started to open up to himself and experience all these new things for like a first time. Yeah, I enjoyed playing him. It was different. And I hadn't really a clue what I was doing, so I just picked something that I thought seemed cool. I like the idea of half elf. The thought of being able to transform into different creatures and stuff really was like, yep, I like that. So it was like, yep, I'll go druid, try that. And the moon druid focused on that. It was good to play as, and he was a very interesting character. Felt like he got the end he deserved. Like it played out for him. Could have probably carried on with him. His story shouldn't have ended where it did, but yeah, it tied it off nicely. I don't know. I guess like I didn't I didn't know what else to do for my character, so I just picked little bits that I thought would seem cool at the time and just went with that. Um, yeah, that's really much him, innit?
It sounds like your first character was a little bit Lee.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what
more
you've just described
more than a
makes
little,
me
I think.
yeah, it makes me think of when I first met you. Uh, yes, which is I think that's often is our inspiration. It's either something we aspire to or it's what we are now.
Yeah, definitely.
And the more you play, the more you end up doing kind of parodies of things or deliberately going opposites. But no, that's cool. So it sounds like you played with that character to an end and then just never used them again.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much same as Jason, unless I'm extremely unsatisfied with how the character either departed or their story ended. I don't really like to continue on them. I feel like yeah, that's it. They're they're done. Their story's ended and they're fine.
That's interesting to me. If I have a character that I've liked, if I can find a way to wangle them into something, then I will. And honestly, almost with the same mindset but with a different outcome, I feel like if a character I built wasn't from a particular universe or a particular timeline or what have you, then sure I'll just use them in some other one because they didn't exist in this one, so it's fine. But I can see your mindset working through even in your campaign that you've joined me into because we worked out but on your sort of help we worked out how to make my existing character join your setting keeping his past. And I would
Yeah,
have been fine throwing his past away, but the way that you worked it out was, I mean, timey-wimey shit, right? But
yeah,
the way it
that's always a
worked
good
was
way.
right. It was good, and I like the fact that I still have those ties. We talked before in previous episodes about building character development and how the character evolves, and that helped a lot with that. But I would have been totally happy if you just said, "Oh no, he needs a new like totally new fresh start." I would have been like, "Cool, I'm going to use the character I built, but with
A
some new
different,
backstory."
yeah, yeah. No,
That's
that for me, it's definitely got a. It has to make sense. That's one thing that I need is it has to all tie in and stick with it.
that's fair. That's fair. How about you, Kristen? What was your first?
So my character has created so many other characters for me. It's a forest gnome, and it's a guess what class? Guess. Yep,
Is it a cleric?
it sure is a cleric.
Of course, it's a cleric.
So her name is Eliwick Lorilla Nix Danella Garrick, and she goes by Puck. And anybody who has ever played with a couple of different of my characters will recognize a couple of names in there. But she was created for my foray into this game, and unlike you guys, I didn't come from a gamer background. So I looked at the book and I have like she's here on paper, right? I didn't know what D&D Beyond was or anything like that. So we had to take my stats and allocate them, where, and I'm flipping back and forth in between all of the different pages of the book trying to create her. But also, she was in Lost Minds of Fandelver, and I was me, a mom, playing with two of my kids, trying to keep them alive. So, Cleric felt like the best choice to try and keep them alive, and it worked. But also I do think that it's a little bit of me. But yeah, she's great because from her, she was my jumping off kind of point into creating several different characters, and now she has kind of intermingled with Lee's world, and his characters too. So she found I've talked about it before. She found a furbolg who was literally on fire, and that was my second character, Cora. And then Cora now has had babies, and one of those babies is one of Lee's characters, and that's helped us with parts of our stories that we felt unfulfilled with. But I like to do what you do, is kind of connect my characters anytime I can kind of put them in places, like even if they're just little Easter eggs for me, it makes me happy. But yeah, that's her. She was great.
It's really interesting to me that you mentioned the use of a cleric because you were there to support and keep your kids alive. Because I'm not new to the game now. I've been playing for a little while, and I know that Azure Fox has been playing for a very long while. And yet, when we joined in the Friendsgiving games, we played in one shot that Jason put together,
Hmm.
and both Azure Fox and I played clerics because both of us included our kids in that game, and neither of
Hmm.
us talked to each other. Or I mean, I didn't talk to Jason. I don't know if he did um, about what we were going to use or why. But we just both so we ended up having a game with two clerics and the
Hmm.
kids, and it worked fine. It was good.
Yeah, keeping them alive.
Um, so my first character, I think most people on the server have probably met him. For the reasons that I described before, where I am more than happy to reuse and recycle my characters. My first character was Odo, um, who I still use today, although at the moment he's stuck on an island. Um, I feel like I have this weird middle ground between what the three of you have said so far, where I am happy to reuse and recycle my characters. I don't care about necessarily, even if they die, I'd probably still keep the sheet and maybe use them in the future. However, I also do have this thing in my brain that says, well, I can't use Odo for a one shot because he's in the thing that Lee's running. He's on an island somewhere, so I can't use him for something else. That doesn't make sense. So I have this very silly middle ground of not wanting to break the immersion of them being away, but also being totally happy with
That's
using them
interesting
elsewhere.
though, because Odo is on an island with a Tusa, but another one of your characters is on a different island with a different Atusa.
With a different Natusa.
Um, yeah, and so I mean that's a different situation for me because Atusa was a character that I was testing out in the pick and play one shot series, and
Mm-hmm.
then I decided to take her forward into a campaign. Um, but I redesigned her slightly for the campaign because I realized I actually made some mistakes in how I designed her for the one shots. But yeah, I just was like, oh, she's a throwaway character for me to test. And then she built some relationships, and I really kind of liked the dynamics that she had with fellow players. So she stayed in that world, but I didn't want to leave her in that world. Like the intention of her was to bring her somewhere else. So now she's in two
Mm-hmm.
places. So Odo can do
She's
whatever.
a 2.0 sir.
She
Yeah.
2.0 sir.
Um,
Oh my
and
god.
actually, yeah, the one shots is one of the. We'll come on to my worst character and how that ties into the one shots and how amazing those are, with the one shot hub that you guys um, have been running. But yeah, Odo's a fighter. I chose fighter because it seemed like a fairly simple class to get to grips with. Um, I didn't have a load of. I'm dyslexic, so reading is a challenge anyway, and retaining information is even an even bigger challenge. Um, so I didn't want to have to read through dozens and dozens of pages of spells, and I knew what fighters did fundamentally. I think one of the things that clinched me on choosing the class was that for spellcasters, the variation between a warlock, a wizard, a cleric, even a bard. Like if you think about all the different classes that wield spells, the mechanics are so diverse and the spells are so innumerous that it became very intimidating. Whereas if you think about the physical combat side of things, generally speaking, rogues, uh, barbarians, fighters, they're all much simpler to just pick up and play, I think. Um, so yeah, I chose a fighter because I figured it would be easier. Um, I chose a halfling because it was a familiar sort of race to me. Halflings or hobbits or whatever you want to call them are in pretty much every fantasy genre of one sort or another. Um, and the RP side of it I knew would be easier because it was something that I could be relaxed and fun with. Um, and yeah, like as you were describing there with the one shots, my first ever game was a one shot. As you guys described it, it was one that I could, in theory, play the same character and develop the levels, but through a series of one shots rather than in a campaign, which meant I knew I was going to have a test bed for seeing what worked and what didn't. And honestly, to this day, I still use Odo and I still love him to bits. I'm grateful that we have gaps in play because he's loud and I play when my kids are asleep typically, and he's he gets a bit irritating. Honestly, I don't like his attitude towards people, and he's a bit arrogant, even though he's got no reason to be. But I love him. It's fun to play for short bursts, but probably not for a campaign. Cool. Okay, so we can circle back and talk about the intricacies of what we specifically liked and didn't like, maybe when we've gone through a few different characters. So let's now think about our worsts, like the characters that for one reason or another we look back on and think I didn't enjoy that at all. And I'm imagine our reasons for considering the worst are all going to be totally different. But let's start with you, Lee.
Yeah.
What was your worst
John.
character?
John the Barbarian. He
on.
was everything about him I enjoyed. I just did not enjoy playing a barbarian because I need magic. I need some sort of something like that that I enjoy, rather than just I go in and I swing my axe and that's about it.
Would
That's
you be
all he
willing
can
to
do.
try a different subclass of barbarian? Because there are a couple of them that have some magic interspersed, or would that still not
Yeah,
be?
that's the
enough?
thing though. But the thing with John is he started out as he went to magic school, and decided books were for nerds.
Beauty
So he
school
started,
dropout.
started deadlifting and became a barbarian. So he had some time, because I took the magic initiate feat and got a tiny amount of access to some spells, but
Right.
he didn't really. It's not the same when everybody else has higher level spells and you can do like some cantrips and level 1 spells, and it just feels a bit plain.
I feel like I'm astonished that you missed the trick of multiclassing as your favorite class,
Yeah,
because
A
a
warlock?
barbarian that says the line. Because ultimately, to do that, all you would have to do is have a reason for him to make a pact with someone, and suddenly he can cast Eldritch Blast whenever he likes.
yeah, that would have been a good way. Except I think I put his charisma pretty
Oh
low,
yeah, that's true. The multiclassing
was-
requires you to
which was
manage your stats a
unfortunate.
bit better.
Because he was a good-looking fella. He was dumb as a post.
If
But
you
yeah,
say so yourself.
if I can say so myself. Yeah, he was fun to play. Like I liked about him, but I hated that when it came down to it, all I could do was really I swing my axe, I rage, and that's all he felt like he was when it came down to the crunch.
That's fair. I sort of personally love being able to get in the fray and take it, because obviously barbarians take half damage when they're raging, and there's lots of other benefits they get from as they level up from their feats. But I sort of enjoy. I don't mind if I miss all the time, as long as I'm still standing and stopping whatever it is from hurting my friends.
Have you played a barbarian?
I have played a barbarian. I think wasn't oh, what's his name? The Owlin. Wasn't he a barbarian?
Huey
Oh.
or Hugh,
Huey.
he was.
I'm pretty sure he was a barbarian.
Hoot.
Hoot hoot. It was a
I
Christmas.
was too busy
Christmas
enjoying
one
my
shot.
elf. I don't know what to tell you.
Hoot hoot. What race was John?
He was a variant human. So nice and plain.
Oh, so you went as vanilla as possible, basically.
Yeah, vanilla as possible. Went the totem bear subclass, so he was resistant to everything apart from psychic damage, with the reason being words still hurt him. So, yeah.
Oh, how could you hate this character? He sounds
It's
amazing.
just every time we
He
got
was
into
fun.
he was fun. Just every time we got into a combat or anything, it was literally just I rage, swing, swing, and there are so many classes that do frontline fighting better. You got paladin who have auras, access to magic, a nice high AC. You're gonna hate me now. But hexblades who have an array of things to be able to counter with their curses, and abilities to manipulate the battlefield, which is really awesome. Clerics that do it like okay, they can.
What? I'm sorry. I didn't. Maybe I need to turn you up a little bit. What?
Mhm.
Clerics do it okay, I guess, on the front line.
Yeah, I guess what you're describing though is Sort of as I said with Odo. Like the barbarian sounds fairly simple, but maybe that would work really well for someone who is new to the game or who is perhaps more interested in RP and just wants their turn to be over during combat. Because actually, if you're a barbarian, you just stand there, you rage, hit, and your turn's done,
That's
and wait for
that's
RP
what
to
I like
continue.
about combat as well. I see it as not only just combat; it's an opportunity for you to be able to role play and express your characters. Because I really like spell description. So when you cast a spell, you make it personal to your character, and I feel that's what I struggle with because there's only so many different ways you can swing a sword or axe.
That's fair, I guess. But didn't John also have a wound broom?
He did,
Stop.
yeah. He had a perfect wound broom that he would, to calm himself down, get his magic wax and twirl it right up, and that would bring him calm. But if
Bring 'em
anybody
back
messed with
for-
it, yeah,
Bring it back
ground
to
him.
November game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you think?
I cannot believe you right now. I had a question, Lee, because I have played with you while you played an Eldritch Knight. So Xeric is kind of still like swingy, tiny, teeny bit of magic. Was that enough to
Nope.
quench your magical thirst?
Nope. It
I mean,
wasn't,
he was a
'cause-
different set of circumstances because of
Yeah,
how
but
he
I
had
played
to come into
Eldritch
play.
Knight as Fred as well, and like I was saying to Jason, that you get access to magic because I enjoyed Fred, absolutely loved him, but I think it's just that really lack of magic. Whereas everybody else were casting like 5th level spells and all this, and I was there looking at my level 2 spells, and I'm the same level as you guys, and I was just thinking like, why have I got such shitty magic compared to like everybody else?
So interesting though, because every time I got in, I had the opportunity to cast magic and have variations on the battlefield, and every time I would cast something or even fire off my bow and arrows, and maybe I'd hit, maybe I wouldn't, maybe I'd be effective, maybe I wouldn't, and then I'd watch you, and you'd just be there like, oh yeah, that one's dealt with, that one's dealt with as well. Like,
but you have to make the sound effect
steamrolling.
when he came in. Do it, Joe.
I refuse.
Add a car
On his
noise on
Heelys.
top of that. Too.
Yeah,
Car noise first.
So we don't sound
Cut
like
that.
idiots.
Do it in the end. Yeah, no, it's fair though. I understand your hesitations about barbarian. But, there's time and a place, but it sounds like you have very specific desires when you're playing
I
around.
definitely do.
How about you, Jason? What's your worst?
My worst one, and it touches back on how I don't like my worlds to kind of collide, but it would be Shay from the Disco campaign, because it was like 80s normal reality world and getting pulled into the Sword Coast, and mixing those two things just really bothers me. And I like the character, and if it had stayed in real world 80s and we had magic, fine, but the pull over to the Forgotten Realms kind of like threw me a little bit, and it became really hard to kind of play this stoner based in the 80s who likes his cult and all this hippie magic from the 70s, and I just couldn't kind of tie them together, gel those two separations together as well as I liked, which is why I like to keep those kind of characters and worlds separated, which probably comes across a lot in my gameplay in the world and stuff like that as well. Very rarely allow you guys to venture into other realms because it's really difficult for me to try and get them to gel properly without like extensive reading on the planes of hell or the Fey realm. If I don't understand it, I'm very hesitant to tie them together. So Shay fell apart for me because of that reason. It wasn't because of the build. I've got no quarrels with any kind of class. I'll play whatever class that needs to be played for the game. I'll make it work, and the personalities are fine. But when I have to mix intelligences of two different worlds together, it just becomes a whole blob for me, and I can't sort of make it work. Which is why Shay kind of fell apart for me.
That's fair. What class? I presume Shay was a human, but what class?
He was a human bard druid.
Didn't he have a little bit of? Did Goo give him a little bit of warlock too?
He gave him a bit of warlock, but that was mostly Goo. It wasn't a leveled.
It wasn't a level.
Just a tip.
Yeah, it's just the tip of darkness.
Just the tip. So
All right.
Oh wow, that sounds like a really complicated character to play
He
as well.
was a cult leader, so he needed to be charismatic, which is where the bard played in, because he needed to get the organize his cult.
Okay.
And also he was a stoner, so he was one with nature, which the druid came into play with. So
I love that concept of and we talked about this the previous episode, and the way that I do things with thinking about what someone's done in the past life, dressing them, and then working out what they're going to be and how they're going to act. And it sounds like you very much did that with Shay. Like he's a stoner cult leader. Okay, how can I build
what class
that character?
Yeah, it's jumping back to the character building for a second. It is like what classes best suit the personality that I'm trying to play, and those two classes just seemed to gel. They made sense. So those are just classes I went for. So yeah, he was my worst. I enjoyed the character. I just didn't enjoy how I had to play and mix those two worlds together. So it kind of ruined his vibe for me.
So in a different setting, would you play him in a different setting and enjoy him? Do you think?
Yes, when I was thinking of Shay, because of that background in being a cult leader and a stoner and all that kind of stuff, if we were to play sort of something set in the 80s, maybe. I don't think I could pull that same character and that personality over to the Forgotten Realms again. I just couldn't do it. His whole persona was based on the knowledge and the surroundings he had from that time period, and I've thrown him just in the middle of a fantasy setting. I couldn't do it. If it was set, the whole campaign or the one shot was set in that time period, fine. But then moving it over to that fantasy world, froze me.
But if someone generated that environment for you and invited, would you ever use Shay again? Because it sounds like once a character's done, you consider them done.
Yeah. I wouldn't use him again. No, he's gone now, as is most of my.
It's really sad for you.
I'm a child of the 80s, and to me that feels like waste, and waste is bad.
Shay was amazing.
Yeah, I don't not enjoy the character. It's hard for me to play the character. No, that's all it was.
I don't know. Never mind. How about you, Kristin?
So, ironically, my least favorite character comes from the same campaign. Her name was Catherine Flynn. She went by Kat. She was an undercover cop. And it turned out when she was dragged into this world, so we were at a New Year's Eve party on 1979, and the ball dropped, and all of a sudden, shit let loose, and we were transported into magic happened, and then we were transported into the Sword Coast, right? And so she realized she was so good at being undercover because she is in fact a changeling, and she thought that she was just good at disguising who she was, but as she went into this alternate universe, she found out that she could literally just she was Shay a couple of times. And she was a soul knife rogue. And I think it might be I had this story in my head, and I just felt like it all fell very flat. And I was very enchanted and enamored with the idea of this soul knife rogue. And I thought because she was undercover, and sometimes she had to go deep undercover, and sometimes that required a little bit of assassination-y, questionable things because she was deep undercover, and she had these soul knives, right? And so basically they're magical and they do this damage, and then there's no evidence left. And so all of it made sense in my head. And then when we went to go and do combat type things, I felt very ineffective. Very ineffective. And then I found out that I could, use my bonus action to give myself steady aim, but that also then ate up my bonus action, which meant I couldn't use my offhand soul knife. It just, I did not feel like I brought to the table what I had wanted to bring to the table. And maybe because I was grumpy in that regard, I felt like it affected my role play. I just didn't feel like she translated very well into the world. I don't know, but
there were definitely times where you could tell you were getting frustrated at trying to portray her, especially in combat scenarios. You
Well, because I mean, she's supposed to be right in this world I had set up for her. In where were we? Like in Sunnyside, Pennsylvania, so somewhere by Philadelphia kind of area. And I had made she was very good at what she did. And so I went into the campaign going, she's very good at what she did. And then when she friggin' can't hit anything in combat. Also, again, anybody who's played with me knows that sometimes my rolls are cursed, and so that's just the way that goes. But she just, ugh, yeah. I'm, mm. I'm bummed to know that it came across that I was frustrated. I'm not very good at hiding my emotions in general, though. I always think that I'm
No.
much better than I am. I'm
Why
fine.
you
I'm
don't
fine. It's fine.
know?
I'm fine. It's great. It's great. We're great.
I find it really interesting, fascinating, that at least two of you describe the worst characters to you. Okay, so Kristin and Lee, I consider you very good at RP, and I consider that RP is important to you in one way or another. And it's interesting to me that both of you, your worst characters well, because they were, okay, I'm simplifying this way too much, but they were ineffective in combat.
Yeah.
But both of you followed that up with, and that made it really hard to roleplay them in combat. Like, the core issue seems to be that it was not necessarily the skills or the combat itself that was the issue. It's how does this character work in that fight and with these skills.
That's fair. I'm going to put an asterisk there, though, because I also feel like, because I didn't feel like I was translating my character RP-wise, I feel like the concept could have been saved if I felt effective in combat.
Yeah.
And so I was already feeling like I was a poor excuse for a human being and D&D player because I was falling so short of my RP standard. And then I also could not bring to the table the combat effectiveness that I wanted. And I think besides Jason, I think in general that campaign was not super duper RP heavy. Would you agree with that? Like, of all of our campaigns.
Yeah, it was mostly combat.
Yeah.
Every session was a combat session for sure.
And so when I'm like, I could have felt okay not being as good as I wanted to RP wise because it wasn't as heavily focused there. You know what I mean? So like, oh, okay, I can at least rest easy knowing that like we only had 15 seconds of RP, but then I sucked in combat too. So it just,
That's fair. And have you ever played them again?
I have never played Cat again. No, and I don't know. I think much like Jason, I don't know that I would. I think she would have to be the exact right circumstance. Like if somebody told me that I needed to reprise her, you would have to tell me that it would be real world with tinges of magic. That's fine, but real world 70s, like she would have to be in the exact right scenario for me to ever want to open. I mean, I haven't gone so far as to delete her from D&D Beyond. She's there as a memory, but yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because for my worst, I do still use them, and one of the reasons for that is because until recently I didn't subscribe to the paid benefits of D&D Beyond, which meant my character sheets were limited to 6, and I didn't want to have to keep deleting and recreating characters. So, not that I would use a character just because I didn't want to delete them, but it felt like I should, I guess, try harder to adjust characters rather than just wipe them out and start again. Because it's early on in my D&D playing, it felt like a lot of effort to go through that process. But my worst character has to be Tatzel, who I still play, and now I enjoy him. But when I think I said this in the last podcast as well, I really, really struggled with the RP side of things. I really, really struggled. I had the concept in my head of what sort of person he would be, but really struggled to put that across. And on top of the fact that I was using the worst class in the game, Warlock, it made it really difficult to...
Didn't he just log out?
I'm retiring.
No, but he was another early one. I think he might have been my third character that I ever created. So it was still early on, and I didn't really know a lot of the spells, and I was still learning the mechanics, and that made it difficult to enjoy the combat side of things. And on top of that, I made him a surly bitch, so that made it difficult to enjoy the RP side of things until I really got into the swing of it. But fortunately, I'll bring them up again. I played him primarily in the one-shot hub, where I could reuse him and level him up, and I could gain skills and learn more about his character. And I ended up persevering because he is a tiefling warlock who lost his tail because he was abused in the Underdark and was essentially used as a mob hand, and made a pact hoping to gain power and prosperity and also gain his perfect form back. He's got scars all over his face and his arms, and he's lost his tail, and he wanted to regain his physical appearance as well as the monetary affluence and fame and so on. And unfortunately, his patron decided that, yeah, sure, I'll reunite you with your body parts, but instead of it being do good things, get your tail back, it's, hey, if you lose a finger, I've got your tail in the ether, and if you lose a finger, then yeah, sure, your finger goes to where your tail is, and bit by bit you'll be, reunited with all your body parts in the other place, not here. And I've persevered with Tatzel because I love that concept. Like, he is torn between essentially wanting total destruction of himself so that he can be reunited with the rest of his lost body parts and with his damaged skin, and he can be that perfect form. But at the same time, that means essentially being completely destroyed in this current world here and now. I've really enjoyed developing that, but it's been a very tough journey. So I hated him. He's my worst character. He's still, I find, very difficult to play, but I am persevering because I like the kind of background concept behind him.
I think
That's a
he's
really
very
cool
much
concept.
a campaign kind of character, Joe, and I don't think the one shot is probably going to do that story justice.
No,
I think you'll have to
He needs that
remake
full
him
character arc.
as maybe something else, or maybe as he is as a proper campaign character, because that's a great concept for a character. Having that divide between wanting to just be whole again, but also he's still attached to this material plane where his friends, family, and motivations.
And invite us because we want to watch you struggle.
Yeah.
I would gladly rip apart that piece by piece for you, Jeff.
I mean, yeah, I did contemplate. There's a couple of things campaigns I've shown recently. I did contemplate reusing him or recreating him for those, but I don't know. I'm still torn. I need to develop the person a little first so that I can really enjoy playing him long term. Because again, just like Odo, I love him in short bursts, but I don't love him in short bursts. I haven't got there yet, but I can play him in short bursts. The idea of playing that person in a campaign terrifies me because, as long as I'm not a method actor, I guess I'll be okay. Cool. So, how about our favourites? I imagine for the same as the worsts, our reasons behind what makes our favourite character will be different for each of us. But Kristin, what's your favourite character and why?
I don't know. I've been stressing about this question. My knee-jerk reaction is going to be Cora. Cora is very special to me. She is, actually, I don't know that everybody knows this, so just very briefly, I did this with, my kids with the first character, and in the meantime, I had been online because I got into it because I was trying to help my kid. He wanted to play, and then COVID happened, and so I was, going to pick up the slack for him. And in the meantime, I found myself online in different Facebook groups saying, like, help, can you help me understand this? I don't know. And people would recommend certain things to me. And then all of a sudden, I saw one day this post saying, hey, I'm looking for a voice actor to do some stuff for me, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. So I said, should I do it? And Chet was like, yeah, why not? And I said, because they're going to say no. And he goes, well, I mean, they're going to say no if you don't put yourself out there anyway. So I did, and so did a bunch of other people. So I was like, screw this, I'm never gonna. And the person contacted me and said, can you give me some sort of, little clip it of saying this? And I did. And I'm gonna put in air quotes, hired me to do this work for him. And I did it, and it was great. And after that, he said, um, as a thank you, I'm going to give you a one shot. You and whoever can play it. And we did. But in the meantime, while we were waiting for that, he said, I've had a spot open up in my campaign. Would you like to fill it? And I was like, oh, like a real, like me as an adult, like a solo human being going and being Kristin instead of being mom going and playing this game. Okay, so I jumped in and then I made Cora, and Cora is that Furbolg that was rescued by this one. So that's how I connected those. And she's very special to me because even though Pac was my first, I still feel like Cora is my first because Cora is how I, Kristin, the solo human, instead of Kristin, the mom who went to go save everybody, um, learned how to play D&D and fell in love with it for me. Um, but there were a lot of things that I didn't love about her, and she was a very sweet character. I think everybody liked her and everybody was looking to her for advice, and I intentionally made it so she was quiet. I wanted to strip a lot of Kristin away so Kristin could just not be Kristin for a second, and people still kept coming to her, and I'm like, she doesn't want to be a leader, just go. She wants to support people. Um, but because she was a little more simplistic, Lee, you joked before and said Winter, and Winter
Yeah.
is she's very complicated and she's so layered and she's so nuanced, and I really, really enjoy playing her because she's a challenge and she's abrasive and she does not care about you or you or you. Like, she's got her things that are important to her, and she goes about them in her own way, and she doesn't care if you see the things that she's doing as important because she sees the work that she's doing as important. And I just really, the longer I play, the more I appreciate really nuanced characters that maybe people don't understand. Miranda is going to be another one that I'm like, I hate to play her. I hate when she interacts with people and she makes people feel bad, but I think that poses a lot of challenges for myself and for other people. So I don't I don't know who my favorite is because I love them all except Kat,
Wow.
who I really wanted to love. But I think, and I really like Atuza. I really like
How many
Atuza.
characters do you think you've had, roughly?
A lot. I don't know. I mean, with different one shots, I'm just gonna pull 20 out of the air. I don't
Mhm.
know how accurate that is. I would actively have to look, but because I share my D&D Beyond account with one of my kids who literally just in his favorite pastime spends his time creating characters. And so there are about a gazillion on there. I'm gonna say maybe 20, but those and I love Thivara. I can't choose. I can't choose. And actually, I had written down this question that I wanted to ask you guys, and we can come back to it. But like, I think the reason that I can't pick a favorite is every time I try and create a character, I'm like, okay, you're not going to create you. And
Yeah.
every time I play a character, I find pieces of me. And it's really interesting. Like Marigold, for example, she takes it to an extreme, but she has some very Kristin things about her that I didn't
She
intend.
definitely does.
And I like, I'm sorry. Everybody hates me. It's not, I'm just trying my best. And like, I don't understand. Okay, I'm going to try and be positive. And like, I have not found a character yet that I've been able to completely take Kristin out of, no matter
Can
how hard I
can
try.
But
anyone
at the
do
same
that?
time, she's sweet and naive and innocent, so that's totally not.
I
Imposter
mean, I've
syndrome
stripped away
there
a
then.
lot of
Eh,
right. I've stripped away a lot of Kristen Joe. Thank you very much. But I was actually like I said, we can talk about it after this. But I was wondering if that happens to you all as well. Like you go forward and you're like, all right, and then sometimes it's even surprising, and sometimes I have to take a second. Like Daisha, right? Daisha was going through some shit at the same time that Kristen was going through some shit, and it happened to align. And I'm like, I really am gonna have to power through this right now because it's a little personal, which was great and terrible at the same time. But like Daisha was not even a concept that was mine. She was rolled up, you know. I don't know. And move on. I can't.
no, it's interesting to hear. It's interesting to hear. How about you, Jason? What was your
My
favourite? Do you think?
my favorite. I was torn between two. I've been playing an old grumpy wizard recently called Al, who's just a dick, and I love him. He's just old, and he's just fed up with the world, and I just like portraying that across because it's so on the nose. The stuff that he says is very. It's what you expect the old person who you just stepped on their front lawn to be shouting at you as you cross the path and to get to your house. Him and another character called Sal. And Sal, probably it's because of the story that I've given him that I'm kind of playing out, which is why he's currently just in the forefront of my mind. I've played so many characters, and I've enjoyed about 99% of them. So it was really hard for me to pick an actual favorite. If I'm going to be if I had to pick the characters I was going to be playing again for the whole campaign, it'd probably be Al, just to play out because he's only been in one shot, and I just want to kind of play out that in a campaign to see how he changes, and that's just more out of interest for myself to see how he develops as a character rather than the actual enjoyment of playing him. But again, because I go through so many characters and once they're done, they're dead. To me, it's hard to kind of keep them in my mind as a favorite. So it's whatever's most recently I'm going along with that that it becomes my favorite at the time.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm sort of disappointed that I don't think I've met either of those.
No, I thought you were gonna say Willie. As soon as you were describing Al,
Yeah.
I was like, this is for sure William Barfsnap.
Al is the Willie I sat down and actually prepared.
Okay.
So there's definitely elements of Willie in there. The voice is different because it's hard to keep Willie's voice going for the whole afternoon, but the personality of Willie is definitely 80% of Al.
Nice.
I've always been incredibly impressed with how quickly and well you can put together characters, Jason. That like you come up to if someone needs you in a game for something, you very regularly will say, "Oh, I'll put something together and I can join in." And the character that you put together is always different and unique in some way. And I think we need a whole new episode on how you make your characters actually unique. Because I agree with what you said, Kristen, about putting elements of ourselves in our characters, and you end up having some kind of connecting thread through lots of them. Sometimes the thread like jumps up and down a bit to different attributes of ourselves, but yeah, I think that would be a great discussion as well.
Probably why all my characters are knobheads, though, innit? So.
Yeah. How about you, Lee? What's your favorite?
My favorite is probably the first one that I went with a random group online, and it's Isaac. He met a bittersweet end, was killed in battle. But I really enjoyed his story. He was a nobleman who didn't want to be a noble anymore, and came from a place where it was like very very poor, and there was a clear line of you're poor, you're rich, we're keeping the money, don't want to share it. But he wanted to go to this place to bring back riches for the poor, and I really enjoyed that sort of story. But he was ill prepared, so he made a deal with somebody to give him powers and abilities to be able to keep himself alive and fulfill that promise. But unfortunately, he was not able to do that.
It sounds like
Mm.
Isaac and Zach would get along.
He's
No, they
he's a
definitely
bag
wouldn't.
of ashes on Cora's hip.
Yep.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
that's sad.
it is
How
very
many
sad.
how many characters have you played? Do you think, Lee, over your time?
Oof, characters I played a fair few. I probably
1,000,000.
1 million. No, I think it's probably it wouldn't be far off what Kristin was saying. Maybe like 25, 30,
Okay.
30 characters. Um,
How easy was it for you to when we first proposed this whole discussion? How easy was it for you to settle on that favorite?
I think it was fairly easy because I was going through all the characters I have played, and I was thinking there are moments in there that I really enjoyed doing and experiences that I've had with them characters that have meant a lot to me. But when I go back to it and think about it, there's always that moment with Isaac, the whole story that he had that has not seemed to have left me ever. Like that's something like when I think about it now, it's like as if it happened just last week. And I think
Yeah.
that is like been very important to me. And I don't know whether it was because he was the first character that I put a lot of thought into, writ a nice backstory, and then played with people who I wasn't familiar with, then tried to give everything I had to do roleplay and everything in. So I put a lot of me into this character, which is difficult um, because you become very vulnerable, especially with
Yeah,
people you don't know. And
absolutely.
yeah, I think with any character you make, you like you said, Kristen, you are going to put some of you in them characters, and that's why they're so important to you. And
Mm.
when you're in a campaign with them and you're going through all these different sessions, you get so attached. And when they go through an experience, and you can feel that yourself, so it is emotional for you when you play these games.
I'm just gonna say that, like, as somebody who went through a majority of Isaac with you, but also somebody who personally quickly became very close to you as a person, I think that Isaac's growth and Lee's growth had the same kind of they hit a very certain trajectory at the same time. And so I don't know if it would have been any character, but I feel like there was a lot of growth in Isaac at the same time that there was a lot of growth in Lee, and I feel like that kind of intertwines it a
Yeah,
lot, or at least I assume that that would
yeah,
intertwine it. It
yeah,
intertwines it for me.
yeah. I feel like that's how it feels to me as well. Like that's sort of a big part why he will always be my favorite.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Having practically forced you all to consider, or nagging you all week, consider what your first, worst, and favorite characters were. I'm gonna be a true cop out and say I can't really choose because I love Odo for a multitude of reasons. He's so much fun to play, and it's an accent that I really enjoy doing. Actually, do you know what? Accents is probably the reason that I enjoy most of my characters. If I can get into an accent and really throw myself into it, I know I'm going to have fun. Um, I think probably Odo would be my favorite. He's very precious to me, and I've always said that I don't care if my characters die. They're just words on a piece of paper. But I think if Odo died, I might actually break down a little bit. So yeah, maybe he's my favorite for but and for RP reasons. In fact, isn't it interesting? And you can all shout me down if you think I'm wrong. But when we were talking about the worsts, almost all of us talked about their sort of efficiencies and abilities. But when we're talking about our favorites and the things that we like about specific characters and so on, it comes back to relationships, connections, backgrounds, the story-driven side of the character
Mm.
much more. None of us have said, "Oh, this one was my favorite because he was a warlock and he could do Eldritch Blast," and that's because that would be a terrible way to run a character. But we've all kind of hinged on sorry, Lee. We've all
Yeah.
kind of hinged on the roleplay side and the story side, and I love that. I think it's wonderful.
I mean, because as nice as it is to do like 57 points of damage each round, right? Everybody likes to feel effective. I think that, you know, Jason talked about it at length earlier in a different episode, which is flaws make your character fun,
Mhm.
right? Um, and while you don't want to feel ineffective at combat because you did come to play the game, and if you're constantly losing that aspect of the game, it's still not fun. Um, but I think that a bunch of us, at least the four of us, enjoy exploring the flaws in a character and how to overcome or work around the flaws of a character, and how the party around you helps you develop that character and maybe identify the flaws, or that character arc. The same reason why Jason was saying that Tatzel would be good in a campaign, right?
Mhm.
Because then you'd have all of those intrapersonal relationships that would help you pose different questions about Tatzel to yourself that maybe you as Joe wouldn't even think about.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think being effective in battle, it comes down to how you take those like misses, and also how the DM. I often describe when people miss as the enemy doing something to stop them from hitting
Hmm.
them. And
Mhm.
I
Yep.
think that can help relieve some of that pressure. I go, oh, you roll low, you don't hit the AC, but it's because he's caught your fist as a show of power, or he's pulled up his shield, or he's thrown a pumpkin into your face and you hit the pumpkin instead.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff that the DM can help with those situations and really like nullify those misses and make it feel like it's not because my character's bad, it's because this enemy is actually quite difficult to hit in the first place.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can also role play those misses as well if you're able to and you're confident to do that. If you do miss, you can describe how you miss, which can give you that power back of controlling the narrative of that combat, which I found helps
I
me.
like
Yeah.
that.
I will say as well that I feel like that speaks to Lee's worst being ineffective because you felt like it was difficult to roleplay because there's only so many things you can do. And equally, we played a Cthulhu game last night, and Christian, you had almost the opposite experience where you were very ineffective in the end. But it made total sense for what your character was doing. Actually,
Mm.
I really enjoyed the fact that you were at the back, basically combating your desire to just go along with what the big bad wanted to do and open the book and whatever. Like, it made sense. If all you do is go in with a character and you're like, I want to shoot my bow and arrows and hit hard, when you miss, it feels rubbish. If you
Mm.
have this character in mind that are like you say, Jason, you can role play it and I've missed because, and you're thinking more about the character rather than just about the weapons. It's so much easier to have fun, I think. Yeah, cool. Okay, it's we're getting better and better at this every week, and I love it. It's really fun. Um, Kristin, I love your idea of discussing the bringing ourselves into our characters and how that flows. And I think that would make an excellent segment for a discussion about how we make our characters unique. Um,
Stay tuned.
yeah. Also, just as a last ditch, I keep saying I think in my I've had a recording with you recently, Kristin, that will be out soonish, where I kept saying the same thing: keep it simple, don't sweat the small stuff. I feel like that's a real big takeaway here because we had a list of things to kind of mention as we were talking about our characters, and at no point really, unless prompted, did any of us talk about, oh, I liked or disliked this character because of their race or because of their class or because of their height. But the specifics of what we chose, it all came down to how we interacted with that character, not what they were.
Hmm.
And I think anyone that's starting out in D&D can take that away and be like, don't worry if you aren't sure what race or what class to play. That might not have as big an impact on your enjoyment as you might
Hmm.
expect, is all I would say. Cool. Okay, well, thanks, guys, for chatting with me again. It was great fun as always. And thank you, all of you dear listeners, for joining us. I cannot wait for our next conversations. If any of you have any ideas or requests for future episodes, why don't you visit wickedcoolkids.co.uk and let us know. And remember, if you can't be cool, be wicked. Until next time, thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Wherever you found us today, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great content, and if you want to find out more about what we do, how to support us, pick up some merch and find links to our friends like JB Media, visit us at wickedcoolkids.co.uk.